So we're going to have a look at the Australian Counselling Association Code of Ethics version 16. So this was recently released. I'll just see if I can, for those of you who are listening to the audio only, I've brought up the document and we're just going to go through it together. Okay. My first, I guess, observation, and it could just be because of how I'm loading it into the software that I'm using at the moment, which is Canva. It looks like, we're outside of printable margins and things like that. So not that that's got anything to do with anything. It looks like it's going to be about 12 pages long. So let's just go through it together. So it begins with the table of contents. Says it's version 16. We're going to the preamble. So it says the ACA has been established to provide an industry-based association for persons engaged in counsellor education and practice to monitor, maintain, set and improve professional standards in counsellor education and practice, to be a self-regulatory body to provide for registration for members, and to provide a mechanism for dealing with complaints about members, and to liaise with the government for the benefit of members and the public. So that's interesting, isn't it? I think what I might do is just hit pause on the recording and see if I can bring up the previous code of ethics, and we'll be able to do like a side by side and see if there are any differences. So just one moment while I do that. I'll just hit pause, not on the podcast, the show. If we're having a look at the previous version, that was version 15, and that was 5 years ago now. It was the 18th of March 2019. We're now currently 21st of September 2024. We can see that so far the preamble looks pretty similar. They've got commits to membership of the ACA, commits members to adhere to the ACA Code of Ethics and Practice. The Code of Ethics and Practice applies to their work-related activities. It includes clinical or counselling practice, as well as research, teaching, supervision of trainees and other activities that relate to the overall general training and employment of the counselling profession. Looks like it says that in the previous version as well. It says that the Code of Ethics and Practice is intended to provide standards of profession conduct. Oh, that's interesting. So we've got a little bit of a typo in their last ones here, which is disappointing, I think, to see, isn't it? But it happens. We're all human, so that's okay. I think it's meant to say professional conduct that can be applied by the ACA and by other bodies that choose to adopt them in Australia. Depending on the circumstances, compliance or non-compliance with the Code of Ethics and Practice may be admissible in some legal proceedings. That's interesting. Let's have a look over here. Yeah, pretty much says the same thing. Then we've got the definitions. So we've got A through M. Let's have a look here at the definitions. Again, we've got A through M. So I'm assuming they're probably going to be quite similar, but I want to go and have a quick look. So they've defined the association as the ACA. The associated party refers to any individual or organisation other than the clients with whom counsellors interact in the course of rendering a counselling services, including clients, relatives, friends, employers, employees, carers and guardians, other professionals or experts, representatives from communities or organisations. Interesting. We have pretty much the same thing over here in the new version. Now, what's interesting about that is it's essentially defining the associated party as anybody that the counsellor is interacting with within and without the actual counselling relationship. So, for example, if you were having a business dealing as a counsellor, maybe you made a transaction, maybe you purchased, I don't know, maybe you purchased somebody's digital product, or maybe you purchased a package of supervision with somebody, right? And you failed to act in integrity and honour your payment plan or your commitment or something like that, this code of ethics could apply, and the creditor, the person that you owe money to, could make a report to the ACA based on this. So that's important for you to be aware of. That's just one example. And it's just top of my mind at the moment because I'm dealing with a few outstanding invoices. But as you can see, it's quite a broad scope, isn't it? It's quite a broad scope. Client is referring to a party or parties to a counselling service involving counselling, supervising, teaching, research, and professional practice. Clients could be individuals, couples, families, groups of people, organisations, communities, facilitators, sponsors, or those commissioning or paying for professional activity. It's the same in the previous one. Code refers to Code of Ethics and Practice. That's the same. The definition of counsellor refers to anyone delivering what a reasonable person would assume to be a counselling service. See below. And it's the same in the previous version. And it simply says counselling service means any service provided by a counsellor to a client, including but not limited to counselling activities, professional practice, research practice, supervision, and teaching. That's the same in the last one as well. So far, nothing really different there. The guidelines are the same. Then we've got legal rights. They look to be the same. Members means all those covered by the ACA Code of Conduct. That's the same. Moral rights, referring to the UN. That's the same. Okay, so that all seems pretty similar. If we go down to 3.0, let's have a look. It looks like about 8 points under there. And we've got 9. So let's have a look. We've got 9 in the new version. So let's have a quick look at the new version. So it's saying that Code of Ethics, the helping relationship constitutes the effective and appropriate use of a helper's skills. I wonder if that should say counsellor, but that are for the benefit and safety of the client in his or her circumstances. It'd be, I don't know, again, just something for me, and this is just my opinion only, but I think, it'd be great to use proper pronouns and things like that to acknowledge all people. We've got his or her. Perhaps it should say his, her, or their circumstances. I don't know. What do you think about that? Am I just being nitpicky now? And here, should it be counsellors' skills instead of helpers? But does it make much of a difference? I think inclusion is very important. So to me, I think that this does make a big difference. But again, what do you think? Therefore, as members of the ACA, regardless of level, we will, number 1, offer a non-judgmental professional service free from discrimination and honouring the individuality of the client. So we've got that here as well. And then we've got establish a helping relationship in order to maintain the integrity and empowerment of the client without offering advice. Now, this is interesting, isn't it? Because without offering advice, that's one of the key things with counselling, isn't it? We shouldn't be offering advice to clients. However, if your client is a supervisee, I wonder how we apply this code of ethics, because there may be times where they are coming to you for advice. So what does that mean? And how do we give guidance to supervisees in a way that's still compliant with the ACA without giving them advice around things like ethical dilemmas and stuff like that, especially when they're coming to you seeking that in your professional capacity. Without offering advice. Yes, be committed to ongoing personal and professional development. I think that's pretty standard, isn't it? Yes. Be responsible for your own updating and continued knowledge of theories, ethics, and practices through journals, the association, and other relevant bodies. Well, I don't know. I feel like this one here is kind of covered in point 3. But what do you think? Be responsive to the needs of peers and provide a supportive environment for their professional development. So I think here, this is really important too, isn't it? I don't know about you, but I have certainly seen in online communities, perhaps even my own online communities, times where other members of the ACA who've been, I guess, not being overly helpful, not providing that supportive environment to peers for their professional development. In fact, they've been quite critical. There's been difficulties where people have had to be removed from my group to such an extent that I've had to go and make a whole separate other group. So I think that that's something to be really mindful of if you are a member of the ACA and maybe you don't have a diploma, for example, maybe you have a tertiary qualification like a bachelor's or a master's or something like that. Please, and you're in the ACA, you have membership of the ACA, it's upon you to be mindful of providing a supportive environment and be responsive to the needs of peers, and maybe be mindful about what you're going to say. We want to be, and I think this code is speaking here about the importance of raising the profession up by raising each other up. Okay, and there's a difference, isn't there, between how we support someone and how we raise them up versus just piling on somebody. But again, I'd like to hear your views on this as well. Then we've got undertake regular supervision and debriefing to develop skills, monitor performance, and sustain professional accountability. Fair enough. Is that in the old one as well? Be committed to ongoing professional development. Sure. Okay, so that's a little bit different there. That's something that we've found. So let me just try and make this look a little bit easier for you here. So we've got that. We've got be committed to the ongoing personal and professional development. Then we've got ensure client understanding of the purpose, process, and counselling of the relationship. Okay. Undertake regular supervision and debriefing to develop skills. Yep, we've said that. Ensure client understanding of the purpose, processes, and boundaries in the. Okay, so it looks like this here is the new bit. So let me just see if I can change that color for you so you can see. This looks like it's new, that wasn't included in the previous version. Undertake regular supervision and debriefing to develop your counselling skills, monitor performance, and maintain professional activity. So I'm just looking here at this one, and if I've missed it because I'm just not seeing it, please let me know. But I can't see it here. Okay. Then we've got ensure client understanding of the purpose, process, and boundaries of the counselling relationship. Offer a promise of confidentiality and explain the limits of duty of care. So let me just see if I can put this one in bullet points here so that we can more easily sort of break them down. There we go. I can see that one straight away. Oh. So for those on the podcast, I'm just the formatting's off on because I uploaded it to Canva. So I'm just trying to make it a little bit more readable for those that are following along on the video here. Because it's important. There are a couple of differences. There are a couple of changes. Okay, so I've done that. All right, let's have a look. So offer the promise of confidentiality, ensure client understanding of purpose. So we've got promise of confidentiality and limits of duty of care, understanding of purpose. Good. Okay, same. For the purpose of advocacy, receive written permission from the client before divulging any information or contacting other parties. Now, this is really important, obviously. it's the same in both. We really must be so mindful of this. It's something that comes up in the supervision that I conduct with private practice owners around. I don't know if we've got couples counselling and one partner drops out of counselling, and then later on they want a blow by blow account of what's happening with the current client. Situations where you're perhaps working with teens or parents, and there's been a separation, there are orders in place, they're not orders in place. What happens if, like, the mum brings the children but now dad's wanting access to things. It's really important. These code of ethics are here not only to support the clients and the public, but to support you as well, and give you guidance as to what to do. So they're really, really instrumental in making sure that you're behaving professionally in a way that's going to maintain the privacy, dignity, trust, all those kinds of aspects of the therapeutic alliance there. Offering a promise of confidentiality and explain the limits of duty of care. I think that's pretty much going to be covered by your informed consent. Some of you call it a contract, and it's included in your counselling contract. But for those of you who have a simple informed consent form, that will be covered there. For the purpose of advocacy, receive written permission. Yes, we know that. Endeavour to make suitable referrals where competent service cannot be provided. Now, this is something that is so important, and it is there's been no change. It's the same in the old or in the previous version as well. And it's something that I emphasize all the time with my private practice certificate students. And also with my private practice business owners that I work with in a private capacity as their consultant for setting up and growing their business. It's really, really, really important that you don't misrepresent your scope of competence. And it's a really simple thing to do without doing it intentionally. For example, it can happen when you're creating your Psychology Today profile. There's a section on there, well, there's a few sections, but there's a section on there that lists out all of the things that you can help with. Now, it has to have that list. It's a checkbox. It will say PTSD, anxiety, grief and loss, It has to have all of those because there's such a breadth of skill, right? And, if that's your area of expertise, if that's your area of competence, you tick it. You don't tick it because you think you can or you think you want to. My guidance and my general rule of thumb, as somebody who used to be a consultant to some lawyers, was to always make sure that you can back up whatever it is that you're saying in your marketing and your advertising. So if you're saying on your Psychology Today profile that you work with borderline personality disorder, make sure that you've got qualifications in working with borderline personality disorder. It means that you are acting in an ethical way, working within your scope of competence. There are certain areas that require specialist training. Some of them just simply are not covered by a bachelor's. Some of them you will need a master's qualification. Some of them you may need additional PD outside of a tertiary setting to be able to do. But if you've gone through and you've ticked all the things, and you've ticked even something like personality disorders, that comes up a lot. Personality disorders, if you can't demonstrate that you've been trained in that you've completed assessments in it, that you've passed those assessments, then it could be viewed that you're operating beyond the scope of your expertise or beyond the scope of your competence. So please just make sure that, for example, with your Psychology Today or any directory listing, that you've only ticked things that you're competent in, okay? Otherwise, it could be seen to be misleading the public. Also, if you're competent in, let's say, Rogerian, person-centered, CBT, things like that, and then you get somebody who comes along and they want narrative therapy or they want positive psychology, you haven't done any training, you don't have a skill set in that you can verify. It's your responsibility to refer them out. If you're I don't know, maybe you're looking to fill your diary in private practice and you're accepting all the clients that want to book in because your goal is to fill your diary. Just be aware that if you get somebody sitting in front of you, maybe, for example, just hypothetically, perhaps you get somebody who has who's wanting some support around addiction, but you're not trained in how to work with somebody with addiction and things like that, then it's your responsibility to refer them on to somebody who is competent in that. Okay. And I appreciate it can be so hard to feel like you're sending work away when you're trying to fill your diary, but it's more important that you follow the code of ethics, whether it's ACA or PACFA or, Counselling Professionals Australia, it doesn't matter who you're with. It's these ethics and codes of conduct are here to support you just as much as they are to support the public. If you need to fill your diary and you are worried that you're not getting enough of the right people in, that's okay. We can fix that. We can turn it around. But you don't need to be putting yourself or others at risk by working with people that you're not yet skilled or competent to work with, if that makes sense. Okay, the next one is don't provide legal advice or guidance on matters of law, not practice as legal counsel on behalf of or to a client when practicing as a counsellor. So I guess, in my experience, and I'm not sure if this is new, I'll go and check now. What does it say? It's not new. That was there in the old one as well. So I will just change that to yellow just for the sake of highlighting it, because this is a really important point that the ACA is making here, and it's well worth you being aware of it. But, oh no, I've highlighted the wrong one. Hang on. Not acting as the legal advice, etc. That's really important because I think sometimes, not for everybody, but just sometimes when we're working with clients and they're having struggles and things like that, we do want to advocate for them. And that's not our role. Our role is to be a counsellor. We also shouldn't be offering legal advice. So we shouldn't be saying to people, you have the right to do this, you have the right to do that, da 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 da. And it sounds obvious when you read it in a document like this in black and white. But when you're in session with a client and you're showing up in a way that has empathy and you really just want to be helping them, it can be so easy to slip into the role of providing guidance and legal advice. And it's really important that you don't do that. And this is in here for a reason. It's really important that you keep it in your mind, especially if you're working with a demographic where legal issues do pop up a lot. We see this. I'm just going to go back to, when we work with children and teens, and there's family conflict, there's domestic violence, there's custody issues perhaps, and things like this. Just really important not to slip into the mode of providing legal advice. So I think that's a really good piece of advice there. The next one says, it says don't act as an agent for the client. So again, this is saying do not advocate for your client, right? Agency means client self-agency. It's better to support a client to self-advocate. Okay. And, depending on your modality and the area of focus that you have with your clients, this is something that you might want to teach as a social skill if it comes under your social skills training that you're doing with them in their treatment plan. But generally speaking, it's saying your job is not to advocate for a client. And I think that this is a very, very important thing for all of us to understand, especially, I was going to say I see this a lot. I don't see it a lot, but I hear it a lot about people writing NDIS reports, for example, and really wanting to advocate, or when people get approached by lawyers to write support letters for clients. the counsellor can sometimes feel like they want to advocate for the client. And this here is saying, no, don't do it. It's not your job. Your job and your mindset has to be impartial. Okay. And so when it comes to requests and clients wanting you to do these kinds of things, it's always going to be much better if you just give facts. Okay, you stick with facts when you're writing, and it depends what you're writing, what you've been asked to do. And there will be occasions where it's going to vary, and you may be invited to share your opinion. But even when you're invited to share your professional opinion about something, you're always going to preface it with, oops, sorry, I just hit my microphone. You're always going to preface it the right way, etc., etc. So no advocating, right? That's out. Of course, don't have sexual relationships with clients within 2 years of last counselling session. I would say, again, case by case basis, but my general rule of thumb would just be don't do it ever. And I think that's going to be the same as the last one. Yes, it's the same as the previous version. And you know what? This is something that's consistent across disciplines, so nothing really new here. Be committed to the Code of Ethics and recognise that procedures for withdrawal of membership will be implemented for breaches. So this is essentially saying that if it's found out that you have been doing any of these things, like advocating for a client, when it clearly says you're not to do that, you could lose your ACA membership. That's what it's saying. You've got to be committed, and you've got to say, well, I understand that there'll be a withdrawal of my membership if I get, if there's some kind of way that the ACA becomes aware that I have been doing these things. So really important that you understand these from a practice perspective. Okay. Oh, we've got 4.0, the Code of Practice. This code applies those values and ethical principles outlined above to more specific situations which may arise in the practice of counselling. Many clauses and or sections of the code are interrelated, and this should be kept in mind when both reading and applying the code. And that's the same in the previous edition as well. Now, if we have a look here, the old version says issues of responsibility, and it maps out 5 areas. If we look at the new version, it also says issues of responsibility and again maps out the 5 areas. So I'm just going to have a quick look at these and see what the differences are. So they basically say counsellors have a duty of care and a responsibility not to mislead, misguide or misdirect, either overtly by publication or covertly by admission, clients as to the counsellor's level of competence, experience or qualification. So again, this is going back to what we were saying before, just giving you that very practical example of filling out your directory profile on Psychology Today. It is so easy to be tempted to tick all of the boxes, and that's why I'm always saying don't tick all of the boxes unless you can back it up, okay? What else? To do so is considered to be a serious ethical breach because it increases the risk of harm to the client. So if you're saying your Psychology Today profile is one where you've ticked all of the things, and maybe you've ticked the lifespan section where it says, I'm going to get the wording wrong, but you'll know what I mean. It says like children, then it says teenagers, then it says adults, then it says the aged or something like that. It's the whole entire lifespan. If you've got to tick the whole entire lifespan, for example, that's going to be a problem. You might say, well, I've worked with clients who were 3 and I've worked with clients who were 95. Okay, but were you competent to work with a 3-year-old? That's a very different approach to counselling than working with somebody who's 30. And were you competent to work with somebody who's 95 years old? That's very different again to working with somebody who's 30. So making sure that you're competent in the modalities, but also within the treatment or presenting problem paradigm, selection of challenges like depression, anxiety, addiction, borderline, all those kinds of things. Don't tick them unless you can back them up, because if you get clients, then you start working with them, as it says here, it increases the risk of harm to the client. Plus, it damages the credibility of the profession in the eyes of the general public, which is so true. So we don't want to do that. It doesn't matter if you're with the ACA or somebody else. There's a big push at the moment to try and raise the professional profile of all counsellors. You've got to keep your records safe and secure. Take responsibility for your decisions when you're working with clients. And you've got responsibilities to associated parties. So that's any individual or organisation other than the client whom you interact with in the course of rendering a counselling service. So it could be, they've said here, like the relatives, friends, employers, employees, carers and guardians, other professionals or experts, representatives from the community. But it could also be like the wellbeing officer at the school. Do you know what I mean? All those interested stakeholders. The counsellor-client relationship is the foremost ethical concern. However, counselling does not exist in social isolation. Counsellors may need to be mindful of other sources of ethical responsibility. The headings in this section are intended to draw attention to some of these. So I think, when we say some of these, that's probably not helpful to a counsellor who is a member of the ACA. I think if I was in the ACA, which I'm not, I would want to know, well, what are all of the things? Because I don't want to make any mistakes. And if you're only telling me, well, here are some of the things that you need to be mindful of, how am I meant to know what I don't know? So this is like, if I'm being totally academic about this, I think it's problematic that the ACA are only telling you some of the areas. I think they need to tell you all of the areas, so that then you've got something to use as a reference and a guide, so that you can maintain ethical competence in your practice as a counsellor. So the first one here is client safety. We've got 3 points under there, same in the old one. It doesn't look like there's any big difference. It's just saying that you must make all reasonable steps to ensure that the client doesn't suffer any harm as a result of working with you during sessions or for the outcome of sessions. So this is including physical, emotional, or psychological harm. And I think this comes back, doesn't it, to working within your area of competence. If you just don't know how to work with, say, something like domestic violence or something like addiction, and you're, doing your best to be supportive, and then that person still goes off and maybe their symptoms get exacerbated because of something that was discussed during the session, that could possibly put that client and maybe others at risk. Counsellors mustn't exploit their clients financially. I'll be interested to hear more of a definition of this from the ACA. I'm not sure what they mean by that, but I think it might be exploitation, financial exploitation. I think that might be getting vulnerable clients to sign up to things. I'll come back to this one and do another video on it, actually, because it's so important. But yeah, like even in psychology, when I was a practicing psychologist, we had exploitation of clients financially, and there it was really about understanding and recognizing that clients are vulnerable, that they're seeing you as an expert, and just being mindful that you're not getting, someone with significant levels of depression to commit to things financially that they might not be able to follow through and stuff like that. It also means, if somebody has an outstanding invoice, instead of pushing and pushing and pushing, giving them options and saying, listen, understand you haven't paid it. If there is financial hardship, let me know, because there are processes that I've got, and then leaning into the processes that you have with your private practice so that that client can meet their financial obligations without feeling like they're being more stressed, more pressured, and things like that. So it simply look like breaking the payments down into smaller, more manageable repayments. It might mean a pause on payments for a temporary period of time, things like that. Not exploiting them sexually, emotionally, or in any other way. And of course, suggesting or engaging in sexual activities completely unethical. Again, you're taking advantage. Although you might not feel like you're in a position of power and you might feel like you're there to give and help and do all of those things, the perception from the client is that you are in a position of power. They see you as knowledgeable, as an authority, as an expert, as someone who should be trusted. So if you're going to, flirt with a client, if you're going to make advances to a client and things like that, it's going to be very confusing for the client. Some clients might feel flattered because they see you as being in a position of authority. They might go along with it, later to regret it. It could exacerbate all sorts of mental health conditions for the client, etc., etc., etc. Must provide must provide privacy for counselling sessions. The sessions should not be overheard, recorded, or observed by anyone other than the counsellor without informed consent from the client. Normally, any recording would be discussed as part of the counselling contract. Care must be taken that sessions are not interrupted. Now, I feel like I see where the ACA is going with this. It's super important. At the same time, you're human and other people are human as well. And there may be occasions where accidents happen, So we want to just try and mitigate those where we can. But certainly having things in your contract. So, for example, in your telehealth contract, be really clear with your clients about, that they too have an obligation, that they should be in a private space, not walking around the house talking on their phone while you're delivering telehealth, and they're going out into the kitchen making themselves a sandwich and the whole family's standing around. You should have it very clear that they too need to be somewhere private, door closed, not interrupted, pen and paper ready. They should not be recording, all those kinds of things. Okay, so I feel like this is two-way and it's easily addressed in your telehealth, for example, consent form. Okay. I think that's all pretty self-explanatory there. Then we've got client self-determination, and the new version has 4 points. The old version has 4 points. Looks pretty much the same to me, but I'll just read them out. It says in counselling, the balance of power is unequal. That's what we were just saying a moment ago, and counsellors must take care not to abuse their power. So abusing your power looks like you influencing a client unduly and in a way that might not be in the client's best interest. Clients do not normally act on, or counsellors do not normally act on behalf of their clients. This is reiterating that point of agency. And it's really saying, again, the client is the expert in their journey. It's saying the client needs to get outside support, not from a counsellor, that the counsellor's job is not to advocate, not to act on behalf of clients, right? If you do, it will only be with express written consent of the client or else in really exceptional circumstances. So not for everyday things. In fact, I would just be guided by the previous section that spoke about don't do it, full stop. So, yeah. No advocating for clients, not your job. If a client perhaps is asking you to advocate for them, sometimes they may. Usually what happens though is we're listening to the client's story, we're listening to their journey, and we feel that sense of injustice and we feel like very protective and we want to defend our client and we want to be their voice and, things like that. We can kind of move into that. And this code of ethics is saying stop. Don't do it. Be aware when this is coming up for you and maybe take it to supervision. Don't offer to How about I do this for you? Would you like me to call them for you? How about I write you a letter? Don't, it's saying no. It's always going to be much better if you're using some kind of model like CBT that includes social skills training or something like that. Teach your client under that therapeutic modality how to self advocate. It's going to be much better for all involved. Counselors not normally giving advice to clients. Absolutely. I think we all know that, don't we? Not telling them what they should do, but instead using your therapeutic skills to help a client come to their own conclusions about what they should do. And then saying, counsellors have a responsibility to establish with clients right at the beginning the existence of any other therapeutic or helping relationship in which the client is involved. Really important here. So, sometimes you might be working with a client and you've got a word of mouth referral. So you're working with Jack, and Jack goes and tells Jill how amazing you are as a therapist. Jill comes along. Do you know what I mean? Jill says, "Oh, Jack was telling me how amazing you are," and stuff like this. I think it's really important also when you're seeing, dual relationships and things like that. It's so, so, so important. So the existence of any other therapeutic or helping relationships in which the client is involved. So that could be friendships, relationships, all that sort of stuff, and to consider whether the counselling is actually going to be appropriate. This is really about dual relationships here. I should gain the client's permission before conferring in any way with other professional workers too. So that's super important. Then we've got breaks and endings. We've got 3 points here in the new one. We've got 3 points in the previous one. So let's have a look and see if there are any differences. End relationship breaks, there's no difference. It's just saying counsellors working with clients to reach a recognised ending when clients have received the help that they sought, when it's appropriate the counsellor is no longer helping, or when the clients wish to end. Fair enough. External circumstances may lead to endings for other reasons which are not therapeutic. Counsellors must make arrangement. Oh, they've got a typo in here, which is again a bit disappointing, ACA. But again, it's humans that write these documents and we can forgive them for that. But counsellors must make arrangements, plural, for care to be taken of the immediate needs of clients in the event of any sudden or unforeseen endings by the counsellor or of breaks to the counselling relationship. So external circumstances that might cause a disruption or an ending could be things like the client moves interstate. It could be due to the counsellor's own health and well-being. The counsellor decides based on their own health and their own well-being that they just simply cannot work for a period of time. So they're going to be off work, tending to their own health and well-being for 3 months or something like that. So this is examples here, and it's just really encouraging you to be aware that this can happen and to have a process in place for if it does. And this should absolutely be part of your operations manual for your private practice. You need an operations manual. Well, I believe that you need an operations manual for your private practice, even if you're a solo practitioner, so that you know exactly what's going to happen when these kinds of things arise. If you were a group practice, you would have an operations manual. I don't see it as being any different to you having one as a solo practitioner. And just making sure that you take care to prepare your clients appropriately for any planned breaks from counselling. And you should also take steps to ensure the well-being of your clients during those breaks. Well, I think this is pretty difficult to do, isn't it? Like if you're off work because of your own health and well-being, it's kind of saying, help your clients prepare. So of course you're going to say, listen, from, I don't know, next month or in the next 6 weeks, I'm going to be taking time out to look after my own health and well-being. I won't be seeing clients for 8 weeks. Here's what we're going to do, and making a plan for them so that they understand. So you would pre-book sessions before you're going to leave, make sure they had what they needed. You would make sure there was a session in the diary for them for when you came back so that they know that they've got that thing there. And maybe you might give them some therapeutic aids or supports. You might give them recommendations to touch base regularly with their GP during your absence and things like that as well. That's just an example, but there are all different things that you could, sorry, I keep hitting the microphone, that you could put in place. Responsibility to other counsellors. So we've got 2 points in here. It's under 6.4 in the current Code of Ethics. We've got 2 points here as well. And it doesn't look like it's changed. It says counsellors mustn't conduct themselves in their counselling related activities in ways which undermine public confidence as a counsellor or in the work of other counsellors. So again, really important here. This is basically, as I understand it or as I am reading it, making the point that counselling related activities can be anything, right? It could be anything. It could be the work that you're doing. It could be how you show up in an online community. It could be your social media. It could be a blog that you write on your website, an article, a podcast episode that you put out. So this is saying that if you're a member of the ACA, be very aware that you shouldn't put out anything that's going to undermine public confidence in your work as a counsellor or in the work of counsellors in general. So that's something to be aware of. Or in the work of other counsellors. So yeah, I'll just let that one sort of sit there. Not undermining the work of other counsellors. So I guess what's coming up for me, and this is going to be different for all of us, but what's coming to my mind is, again, we've got that disparity, haven't we, between if you've got a diploma and if you don't, you've got something else. Not undermining confidence that the public has in working with somebody who's got a diploma. Interesting. So just be careful of that. A counsellor who suspects misconduct by another counsellor that can't be resolved or remedied after discussion with the counsellor concerned should implement the complaints procedure. So again, if we just take that hypothetical example, let's say somebody's a member of the ACA and they're, having an issue publicly, and they're making some kind of statement about how you shouldn't see a counsellor who's got a diploma because they're not as qualified or something like that. And hopefully nobody's doing that, but let's say that did happen. Well, if you became aware of it, your responsibility is to go directly to that person first, not to the ACA and make a complaint. Your responsibility is to go to that person first. If you're somebody with a diploma and you got offended and, they've clearly breached the code, your job is to go to that counsellor who wrote that post or that blog or that email or did that podcast episode. Go to them first, say your concerns, share your concerns, let that person know what a remedy is that you're wanting, what a remedy is that you're seeking. Just one moment. Buddy wants to go out to the bathroom. I'll just pause for the video and the podcast. Forget what I was saying, but it was something about you need to go to that person first, try and resolve it. Only if it can't be resolved. Oh, that's what I was going to say. Make sure that when you're seeking resolution, let's say somebody put up a post and it was talking about how, counsellors with diplomas, are not as good as counsellors who have a bachelor's or a master's or something like that. And you saw that post. You might not necessarily be a diploma qualified counsellor. Perhaps you too have a master's or a PhD or something like that, but you see this post. Before you go to the ACA and dob on the person or make a report, what you need to do is reach out to the person who made the statement, let them know what the concern is that you have, be professional about it, try and remove emotion, try and be really balanced in how you raise it with them. I would recommend or include desired outcomes. So let them know. It would be helpful if maybe you could reword the post or reword the email or something like that. Maybe you could retract it. Maybe you could replace it with something else. So give them some ideas of what would be satisfactory to you, and ask them, invite them to, reply and let you know what action they're going to take to remedy the situation. Now it's up to them. They might decide, no, I fully back myself here and I'm not going to change it. And that's okay. That's their right to do that. If that happens, then go to the ACA and raise your concerns. When you raise your concerns, make sure that you reference, 6.4, responsibility of other counsellors, subsection 1, right? And include evidence that you've reached out to this other person, include, the thing that it is that has, it's concerning you, include your correspondence to that person, include that person's response, etc., etc. And again, even with the ACA, let them know what you're seeking in terms of a resolution. Okay, and then hands off, let the ACA deal with it, right? ACA will assess what's happened. They'll have a look. They'll measure it against their code here that we're going over now. If they agree that there has been a breach or something like that, then of course they're going to follow it up with the person, and hopefully they will notify you of the outcome. Some membership bodies will never notify you of the outcome. Others will. So I don't know how the ACA handles it, but yes. But they might also say, well, actually, no, maybe, in this situation, this, whatever this person has shared, it's okay and we're okay with it. But thanks for bringing it to our attention and being so studious with this. So always, always, always go to the person first. Try and get a resolution first, and only if there's no resolution and you guys can't meet in the middle, or as professionals you can't meet in the middle, then take it further. Okay. But it's always best, I believe, not to be reporting on each other. I think as professionals, one of the skills that we've got is we've got really highly developed communication skills. We've got highly developed skills around empathy. We've got highly developed skills around compassion, all those kinds of things. So I would be encouraging all of us to lean into those skills first before we go making reports to people. And that's what this is guiding you to do as well. Okay. And I'm sure it's probably the same with PACFA and with any organization. It's probably, the guideline is probably the same. Speak to the person before you come and speak to us about it. Okay. Then we've got responsibility to colleagues and others. And we've got 4 points under that. Let me have a look at the old one. We've only got 3 points, it looks like. Client elsewhere clients, client elsewhere. Okay, let's have a look. So the old version starts off with counsellors are accountable for their services to colleagues, employees, and funding bodies as appropriate. At the same time, they must respect the privacy needs and autonomy of the client, as well as the contract of confidentiality agreed with the client. Okay, so respecting the client's autonomy as well as confidentiality. So I think this is most likely a good example of this could be in the work that we do with EAPs, for those of us who do EAP work. So this is the same. This hasn't changed. Okay. The old version also says that no one should be led to believe that a service is being offered by the counsellor that is not in fact being offered, as this may deprive the client of the offer of such a service elsewhere. So for me, what comes up, and this is in the old version, what comes up for me here is, oh gosh, I did red. I didn't want red. It reminds me of being in school and getting red pen everywhere. I think this is really important because I think this is speaking into the Medicare stuff. So, Medicare is a psychological service. It's delivered under the medical model. When you're accepting, in inverted commas, a mental health care plan from a client, even if you're saying, well, you can't get a rebate, but I can still provide the same service, it's not the same service that they would get from a psychologist or an accredited mental health social worker. So I think this is speaking into that. As an example, there are many examples, but I think it's really speaking into that, and for you just to be mindful of that. So the client should not believe that what they're getting from you is the same as what they'd be getting from the psychologist or from the accredited mental health social worker under the model of the mental health care plan with all its prescriptions. I mean, I know this is a controversial topic, and I know there are many counsellors that feel that they do the work of psychologists and accredited mental health social workers. But under the Medicare framework, there's certain things that the service includes that just aren't included if, as a counsellor, you go and, aim to or seek to or strive to provide a same or similar service. And when you're doing that, for I don't know, hopefully you're not, but if you are saying that you accept a mental health care plan, for example, it could be that you're depriving the client of the offer of such a service that they're really needing and that their doctors are wanting them to access and, avail themselves of. So it's just something to be mindful of here. I know, and I appreciate it's a hot topic. And again, I'm just looking at this from an academic perspective, okay? Now, if we have a look over here, it says the same thing. No one should be led to believe that a service is being offered by a counsellor that is not in fact being offered, okay? So a mental health care plan is for psychological counselling with certain parameters around it, or counselling provided by an accredited mental health social worker with certain parameters around it, okay? The third thing is counsellors must play a demonstrable part in exploring and resolving conflicts of interest between themselves and their employers or agencies. Okay, fair enough. Good, especially where it affects the ethical delivery of counselling to clients. I think that's fairly straightforward. But it could be so challenging too. I mean, think about it. Let's say you're at work and you're working for a non-profit. I don't know, like, I'm just thinking about my experience working with nonprofits and how it was kind of like the mindset back then was like one in, all in, and had to be really, 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 really careful of saying to my boss at the time, I really can't discuss what's going on with Jack, or I really can't discuss what's going on with Jill, even though everything else was kind of always up for discussion. And sometimes it used to make me feel like I was on the outside, like I was being difficult. I worried about how it was going to affect my advancement in the company, all those kinds of things. And so it can be really, really hard to put those clear boundaries in place sometimes, but this is just saying, be aware that you must always try and resolve any conflict of interest when you're working with a third party like an employer or agency, okay? Especially where it's going to affect the delivery of services. So here we've got the same thing. That's all fine. But the new version adds this. So just to, actually, I'll do it in pink so you know it's a change. So this is all new here, okay? This is all new here. And it says, a member will not make any derogatory or insulting remark against the ACA. I don't know why I'm laughing. It's not funny. It's just, a member will not make any derogatory or insulting remark against the ACA or against any other member of the ACA, nor will and again, they've got he or she, I would say, maybe we could put he, she, or they if we're going to be using, inclusive language. Nor will he, she, or they criticize or make an allegation of impropriety or misconduct to or against any employee or another member without first advising the secretary of the ACA of his or her, I'm going to add in, or their complaint or concern. The member making the complaint or expressing the concern will, subject to these rules, abide by any direction given by the secretary. Interesting. So if you're a member of the ACA, you're not allowed to speak out against the ACA. You're not allowed to make a derogatory or insulting remark. Now, what's the definition of a derogatory comment or remark? And what is the definition of an insulting remark as it comes to being against the ACA? I feel like this is unclear and that this is murky waters. I think it's very, very open to subjectivity. I think it's very open to interpretation. I think if you had 100 people and they all heard the same comment, you get 100 different senses of whether it was an insult or not, or whether it was derogatory or not. So I would be seeking clarification on the definition of derogatory or insulting. I guess too, and I don't know what you think, but I guess too, what's coming up for me here is just the idea that we've got, you're not going to say anything bad about us, you're not going to insult us, and you're not going to say anything derogatory about us. I feel like that's almost like and again, I know what I'm about to say is going to be like controversial, and I welcome all your comments and all your feedback as long as they're respectful. It feels to me like this is almost a suppression of our free speech. I don't know. It's kind of like saying, the flip of this is a member will only ever say nice things that illuminate the good work of the ACA and its members. Do you know what I mean? Like, you can only say nice things, or if you say bad things or things that we interpret to be insulting or derogatory, you're going to get into trouble. I don't like this. Again, failure to include a definition of a derogatory statement, failure to include a definition of what constitutes an insulting remark. I think they're two big omissions with this code of ethics. I'm not in the ACA, but if I was in the ACA, I would definitely be contacting them to find out, I would just say something like, I was recently going over the latest revision of the Code of Ethics and Practice, and I want to draw your attention to Area 6.5, Responsibility to Colleagues and Others, subsection 4. Could you please provide clarification or a definition of a derogatory remark and or an insulting remark? And yeah, as I said, I feel like it's like they're telling members all you can ever do is sing our praises. I mean, if you were going to, I guess have an academic approach to things and be impartial and look at the pros and cons and the fors and against and all those kinds of things. If you're going to try and have a balanced approach and you shared something that in your mind was something that was on the against side, are they then going to come back to you and say, well, hey, what you did there or what you said there, we've interpreted that as derogatory. And now we're going to escalate this to the secretary and blah, blah, blah. Interesting. Okay. Nor will he, she, or they, that's something else. Like, if this is important to you around inclusion, I think, again, I would probably be contacting the ACA and saying, like, if you want this policy to be inclusive, let's use all pronouns, so he, she, and they. I don't know. That's just my sense. You might have your own view, but I would definitely raise that if I were a member, because that's something that's important to me, to recognise all members. Nor will he, she, or they criticise or make an allegation of impropriety or misconduct to or against any employee. Interesting. Does this make you wonder why this is even being included now? I mean, if we have a look at the Code of Ethics, which we've been doing a side-by-side comparison of version 15 with this new version, we've only had 2 things be introduced. Was it even 2 things? Let me just check. The other one in pink that I've highlighted is under 3.0, the Code of Ethics, undertake regular supervision. So let me go back to that. Oh no, we haven't. So the only new thing, I'll put this in a different color so we know it's new. I'll put it in the blue. Interesting. So obviously there's a reason why this has been included. So is it that ACA, current ACA members have been making comments that the ACA board, perhaps, I don't know, have been interpreting as derogatory or insulting against the ACA? And that's why it's been included now. And we've got this bit here that says you're not allowed to make an allegation of misconduct against an employee. That's interesting, isn't it? Without first contacting the secretary. Well, let's go and have a look at who the secretary is of the ACA. The ACA.net.au. Let's go and have a look at who the current secretary is. Go to About Us, our team. Let's have a quick look here. So we've got Jody, the CEO, the ACA team. We've got Abby, who's the Executive Officer for Finance and Corporate Services. We've got Andrew, who's the Digital Officer. We've got Samantha, who does Communications and Engagement Lead. Jacqueline, Member Services Team Lead. Shane is the EA to the CEO. Valerie does Events and Partnerships. Michelle is the Indigenous Liaison Consultant and Member Services Officer. Karen is a Student Engagement Officer. Danielle is the Editorial Assistant. Fatima is the Member Services Officer, as is Mia, as is Joanne, as is Kelly, as is Jennifer, as is Nisa, as is Tom, and then we've got Ella. So who's the secretary? Who is the secretary? So basically, the Code of Ethics says we're not allowed to say that any of these people have engaged in misconduct, and we're not allowed to say that any of these people, we're not allowed to make allegations of impropriety against them without first advising the secretary, right? So we can't make any complaints about any of these people without first notifying the secretary, but we don't know who the secretary is. That's not readily available. I wonder if it's in the About Us section. Let me go and have a look in About Us. But you'd think the secretary, consistent, inclusive, progressive, and caring, except if you want to say that, no, don't worry. If I go back, maybe I just missed it. So I've got the CEO is Jody. Then we've got the EO, the digital communications member, EO. There's nothing here about a secretary. So again, if you're in the ACA, how do you feel about the fact that you're not allowed to make any derogatory or insulting remarks against the association or any other member of the association. How do you feel about that? And how do you feel about not being able to criticise or make an allegation of impropriety or misconduct to or against any employee or another member without first advising the secretary, but you don't know who the secretary is? And then the secretary is going to tell you what you should do next, right? The secretary is then, you have to abide by any direction given by the secretary. So what does that actually mean? What's a secretary? So the secretary's role is they're going to receive this allegation or complaint, and then they're going to direct you as to what to do. But what we do know is you're not going to be allowed to tell anybody about it, and you're not going to be allowed to tell the public about it, and you're not going to be allowed to all these kinds of things. So this, I think, is very, 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 very important. I think it's very powerful. As I said, it must have come up for a reason. For them to update the entire code, it must have come up for a reason. I guess you could think for yourself what those reasons might be. But if you're confused about what this actually means for you as a member, how does it make you feel as a member to have to abide by this now? Do you feel like you're being suppressed, like your voice is being suppressed in any way, shape, or form? How do you feel that you can only ever say nice things? How do you feel about not having a definition there of what's considered a criticism, a derogatory comment, or an insulting remark? Like, how's that sitting with you? What are the consequences of that? How's it sitting with you that when a complaint is made about you, for example, does it go on, like, who finds out about that? I'm just checking, is there a register or anything like that? Lodging a complaint. I don't know. Just interesting. Okay, then we've got, moving on, 6.6, responsibility to the wider community law. Where are we? I'm just going silent because I'm just trying to read everything here. Okay, responsibility to the wider community law. We have 1 point here in version 15. We've got 1 point in version 16, same. 6.7, resolving conflicts between ethical priorities. Okay, that's pretty self-explanatory. And with whom? Yep, they haven't changed that. Council's obligations on social media. So we've got quite a section here. It's got 3 subsections over here. It goes into anti-discriminatory practice, confidentiality settings, circumstances, advertising and public statements, boundaries, dual conflicts, counselling environment, committees. So I can't see anything in version 15 yet of social media. So this looks like another new thing that's been introduced, council's obligations on social media. So let's have a look at these. They say, in using social media, registered counsellors. Okay, so sometimes they talk about counsellors and other times they talk about registered counsellors. So let's get a definition of a registered counsellor. So PACFA comes up first, then Better Health, then the ACA Home. Let me just check ACA Home. I'll just see what a registered counsellor is, see if it comes up. Now, when I type in registered counsellor, let's have a look. Nothing on the front page here, but I'll just click into an article from a few months ago. It's from May. It says why every school should have a registered counsellor. Maybe there'll be a definition in here. Well, here it refers to a qualified counsellor, not a registered one. Sorry if I go quiet, it's just because I'm reading. It doesn't say anything about a definition of a registered counsellor. It must be somewhere. I just can't see it. Yeah, if I click in become a member. Okay. So I can't see anything here either about registered counsellors. I just thought it was interesting that we've been talking about counsellors. Now all of a sudden the code's talking about a registered counsellor. So what's going through my mind is, does this apply to all counsellors, or does it only apply to those that are considered, for the sake of the ACA membership tiers, registered, right? So does it apply to students? Does it apply to the different levels? In using social media, registered counsellors need to be aware of their professional obligations under the scope of practice for registered counsellors, the Code of Ethics and Practice, and the guidelines for online counselling and psychotherapy. Okay, so it's got the Code of Ethics here. I'm looking at section 7.1. Registered counsellors will fully explain the provisions of their confidentiality policy and protect the confidentiality of clients in a digital environment by not identifying clients without their consent. Well, I think that's pretty obvious, isn't it? So again, this is, I think, really speaking into making sure you've got a telehealth consent form, but also I think too, now I'm just going to jump the gun a little bit here. I always say, do not get testimonials on your website from counsellors, from counselling clients. However, I know some counsellors do, and this is saying don't identify counsellors without consent. Registered counsellors will be fully transparent in the advertising of their service offerings, not misrepresenting their qualifications or experience. Okay, fair enough. Registered counsellors do not bring the profession of counselling the reputation of their peers. Okay, so not reputation of the peers. Again, not saying horrible things about people who have a diploma, nor the reputation of their professional association into disrepute. So registered counsellors with the ACA must not bring the ACA into disrepute online. What does that mean? I guess that's making me want to go back to what we were talking about before around, well, what's considered, derogatory or, things like that. But that was in the context of talking about employees of the ACA. Registered counsellors do not behave in a manner which may undermine public confidence or the resolution of professional issues. This is interesting. What do they mean by the resolution of professional issues? It'd be great to have a definition of that. Registered counsellors affirm the individuality of each client. They are culturally sensitive. Well, we haven't seen that with the Code of Ethics here, have we? It's not been respectful of all worldviews, and it hasn't been inclusive. It talks about, for example, he and she, it's omitting the they. So I don't know, interesting. And that's online. This information is readily available online. So just an observation, right? 7.2, the scope of practice for registered counsellors. This is coming under the heading of social media. A registered counsellor must abide by the ethical standards set out in the Code of Ethics, must provide consistent information about counselling competencies defined under the scope, okay, and can adhere to their code of practice while maintaining professional relationships with other professionals within a program or a program service. So I would even extend this to in an online community. I mean, we're talking about social media and they're not even mentioning online communities. And it's not just like I'm thinking about my online communities that I have for you, but what about online communities like the, what's it called? Online communities where I think it's called, I'm just giving an example of one, but there are so many. I think it's called the NDIS Providers, Participants and Support Coordinators Group and things like that. So interesting. Okay. Did I do that one? I did do that one. 7.3, guidelines for online counselling and psychotherapy. Now, this is coming under social media. Practitioners, so now we've got practitioners, not registered counsellors, but practitioners. So let me just pop up and see our definitions. We don't have a definition of a practitioner and we don't have a definition of a registered counsellor. So that's confusing. How do you apply these and hold people accountable if you're not going to define what things are? That needs to be addressed definitely. So again, if you're in the ACA and you've got queries and questions, I would maybe even think about asking for clarification on that. Guidelines for online counselling and psychotherapy under the heading of counsellors' obligations on social media. Practitioners should ensure that all information on their own site, so it's a website, is accurate and not misleading and is up to date. Fair enough. Issues relating to confidentiality in face-to-face consultations also apply to the online provision of a counselling service. For example, disclosure of information as in high-risk situation, use of case. Yep. So again, this is just making sure you've got your telehealth consent form there. Do you feel like anything has been left out of this section for social media? And if so, what do you think has been omitted? I'll be interested to hear your thoughts. I don't know that this fits, that, guidelines for online counselling and psychotherapy come under social media. I think that they should be in their own category for, online delivery of service. But anyway, now we've got anti-discriminatory practice. So let's go and have a look at this one. So the old version has A, B, and C. What have we got here? I'm going to say A, B, and C. Values and context, counselling and responses. So nothing's changed there. Confidentialities, subsection or section 9.0. And we've got 3 subsections under there. Same in the old one. Digital processes, doesn't look like any of that's changed. 10.0 settings, we've got 2 sections under there, we've got 2 sections under there, so that hasn't changed. Then we've got exceptional circumstances, that's 3 subsections also in the newest version. Subsection 12 is management and confidentiality. Let's have a look over here. That looks the same to me as well. It doesn't look like anything has changed there. Oh no, it has. Let me have a quick look. Okay, so under management and confidentiality, counsellors must pay particular attention to protecting the identity of clients. Counsellors should ensure, that's the first one. The first one says counsellors should ensure that records of the client's identity are kept separately from any case notes. So that's changed. So let me go and highlight that in pink. So the old version says that, I'm trying to do pink highlights for those who are watching along. I'm sorry if this is frustrating for you. So the old version says that counsellors should ensure that records of clients' identity are kept separately from the case notes, but the new version just says that you must pay particular attention to protecting the identity of clients. Oh, and then it goes on to say, should ensure that records of the client's identity are kept safe. Okay, so there's actually no difference there. Arrangements must be made for safe disposal of records. Care must be taken to ensure that personally identifiable information is not transmitted through overlapping networks of confidential relationships. When case material is used for case studies, reports, or publications, the client's informed consent must be obtained wherever possible and their identity must be disguised. So we've got the same in the old version. And then we've got any discussion of a counsellor's work with other professionals should be purposeful and not trivialising. Let me read that again. Any discussion of a counsellor's work with other professionals should be purposeful and not trivialising. Now, that's new. That's not in, oh no, it's not new. So they just rearranged a few things there. Okay. But again, I'd love some clarity around what this actually means, because I think you could take it to mean a few different things. So some clarification on that would be really helpful. Then we're going to section 13, which is the contracts. We've got advertising and public statements. There's 3 points in the new version, and we've got 3 points in the old one. The first 3 points, advertising and public statements, doesn't appear to have changed. 13.2 is pre-counselling information. There's 2 points under that. That hasn't changed. Then we've got 13.3, which is contracting with clients. It's got a number of points. It looks to be 6 on the new version. It's 6 on the old version. It doesn't really look as if anything's changed there. Then we've got boundaries with clients and former clients under section 14.0. And again, nothing's really changed there apart from reference to different sections. No, it's still section 14.9.b. It's fine. We've got dual and multiple roles under 15. So let's have a look here. Exploitation. That hasn't changed at all. Now let's have a look at section 16, which is competence. So we've got counsellor competence and education, and it looks to have about 10 points, the new version. The old version also looks to have a few points, but less. So let's have a quick look and see if there are any changes that ACA members need to be aware of for counsellor competence and education. So we have counsellors must have achieved a level of competence before commencing counselling and must maintain continuing professional development as well as regular and ongoing supervision. So that's the same as the old one, the old version. Subsection point 2, counsellors must actively monitor their own competence through counselling supervision and be willing to consider any views expressed by their clients and by other counsellors. That's the same as the previous version. 3, counsellors must have a zero tolerance alcohol and illicit drug policy in their workplace. Okay. Here's me just making some notes about this because I do sell essential forms for private practice. It's a base template bundle. So I can go and add this in because I'm sure there'll be businesses, private practice owners that don't have this. Zero tolerance alcohol and illicit drug policy. Okay, in the workplace, and for the counsellor up to 8 hours before engaging in a counselling session. up to 8 hours before engaging in a counselling session. Under no circumstances is alcohol to be consumed by a counsellor during a counsellor session or during working hours. Counsellors are responsible for monitoring their functioning and will not counsel when their functioning is impaired by alcohol or drugs, be they illicit or licit, in situations of personal or emotional difficulty, excessive tiredness, or illness. Counsellors will monitor the point at which they are no longer competent to practice and take action accordingly. Counsellors should always err on the side of caution in such cases. Now let's have a look at the previous one. The previous one says counsellors must have a zero tolerance alcohol and illicit drug policy in their workplace and for the counsellor up to 8 hours before and, of course, during their working hours. Counsellors are responsible for monitoring their functioning, will not counsel when their functioning is impaired by alcohol or drugs, be they illicit or licit. In situations of personal or emotional difficulty, excessive tiredness or illness, counsellors will monitor the point at which they're no longer competent to practice and take action accordingly. Counsellors should always err on the side of caution in such cases. Competence includes being able to recognise when it's appropriate to refer a client elsewhere. Okay. As well as engaging in regular professional supervision in accordance with the supervision policy, counsellors should take reasonable steps to also seek out peer supervision to evaluate their efficiency as counsellors on a regular basis as required by the ACA membership guidelines. Now, I work with all counsellors. However, I do also have a separate space for counsellors with a diploma, and they have access to monthly peer supervision there. So let me just, that's section 16. I'm just making notes, that's why I've gone quiet. Subsection 5. Okay, counsellors must recognise the need for continuing education in their chosen profession. Well, the profession is counselling. To maintain a professional level of awareness of current scientific. Oh, hello. This is interesting, isn't it? Current scientific. I know where this is going, do you? And professional information education in particular fields of education. Let me just see what it says in the previous one. Continuing tomorrow. Right. So it does say scientific in the previous one as well. How interesting, because counselling is not a science. Counselling doesn't even fall under social sciences. Psychology is a science, and psychology never used to be. In fact, just before I became a psychologist, just before I started studying back in the 90s, psychology was where counselling is now. Not being seen, not being recognised, not being heard, not being valued, all of the things. And our professional body at the time was called the Australian Psychological Society. And they worked really hard with government departments to have psychologists recognised for the work that they're doing. But the government departments were like, no, we can't take you seriously because you're not scientific. And so while I was studying, I was there for that whole transition. And what ended up happening was our course got rebranded and renamed under psychological sciences, and the subjects that we did while we were still doing counselling theory, we had to do the 1,000 hours of unpaid counselling placements, or all of this sort of stuff. We also had to do subjects that were scientific, and that meant they were called lab reports and things like that, but we had to do lots and lots and lots of was called testing, and it looked like having a hypothesis, so having an idea and saying, oh, we think that or I'm hypothesizing that if people meditate for 5 minutes every day, they can reduce their anxiety. And so that'll be the hypothesis. The null hypothesis would be it doesn't affect their anxiety. The active hypothesis would be that it did. And then what we would do is we would take a control group, because we're using experimental language here to be seen as scientific. We would take a control group and we would give them, no intervention. Then we would take our experimental group and we would give them an intervention. The independent variable would be the meditation, and then we would administer a psychometric assessment pre and post. So we might do, 4 weeks of meditating for 5 minutes in the morning at 9 a.m. And we would measure people's self-reports of anxiety at the start of the 4 weeks and at the end of the 4 weeks, and we'd see if there were any significant differences between the people who had received the intervention and the people who hadn't. And then we would write a scientific report, and oftentimes those reports would be published. And that was what was required for us to do as psychology students who just wanted to do counselling. But this is what was required for us to do in order to be seen by government bodies as working in the medical model. And then we were able to go on to Medicare and all those types of things. So that's what we had to do. So the fact now that we've got the recent introduction of the ACA saying that counsellors must be professionally aware of current scientific information is very interesting to me. And that smells like this is moving in the direction, because counselling follows psychology, right? The ACA adopted and PACFA adopted the models from the Australian Psychological Society for how to set up their businesses and things like that. And now they're just starting to, you've seen over recent years, the formalisation of the structure, the formalisation of who we're going to approve as a member based on what qualifications and things like that. We've seen all of those changes. And now we're seeing the introduction here of words like scientific, and it's your responsibility as a counsellor in the ACA to be aware of the science of what you're doing. Very, very interesting. This is preparing you to move into Medicare. I say, in my opinion, that's where this is going. The next one is counsellors should take steps to maintain and improve their level of competence through ongoing PD, keep up to date with best practice. Counsellors are responsible for ensuring that their relationships with clients are not unduly influenced by their own emotional needs. Let me just go back and check the previous version. Yep, same. Counsellors must have professional indemnity insurance and maintain adequate cover. When uncertain as to whether a particular situation or course of action may be in violation of the code, counsellors must consult with their supervisor and or other practitioners. So you do that in your peer supervision, I imagine. And yes, that's the same in the new version. Moving on, Section 17. We're nearly at the end, everyone. Section 17 is the counselling environment. Let me just have a quick contrast and comparison here. It does not look like there have been any significant changes here. No, that all looks same. If we go into 18, Section 18, it's about committees. Let me have a look, see if it's the same. Again, this looks the same. Yes, that's the same. Equal opportunities. Committed to promoting, it says the ACA is committed to promoting quality of opportunity of access and participation for all of its members in all of its structures and their workings. Well, really, I don't know, because there was that omission there of like accurate current pronouns. Unless that's all changed and I'm just not up to date with it, which is also entirely possible. I'm referring to he, she, and they. He, she, they, them. ACA has due regard for those groups of people with identifiable characteristics which can lead to visible and invisible barriers. Sorry, I'm just trying to see if I can move that around so we can see a little bit more. Oh, thus inhibiting their full participation. The Australian Counselling Association is committed to promoting quality of opportunity of access and participation for all of its members in all of its structures and their workings. ACA Inc. has due regard for those groups of people with identifiable characteristics. What do they mean by identifiable characteristics? Is there a definition? If we go back up to the definitions, no. Well, that's something I'll be asking for. If I was in the ACA, I'd be asking for, can you please provide clarification on the definition of an identifiable characteristic? Which can lead to visible and invisible barriers, thus inhibiting their joining and full participation. Barriers can include age, colour, creed, culture, disability, education, ethnicity, gender, information, knowledge, mobility, money, nationality, race, religion, sexual orientation, social class, and status. The work of the ACA aims to reflect this commitment in all areas, including services to members, employer responsibilities, the recruitment of and working with volunteers, setting, assessing, monitoring, and evaluating standards, and the implementation of the complaints procedures. This is particularly important as the ACA is the voice of counselling in Australia. Well, I would say it is a voice of counselling in Australia, and refer the ACA to its own code of ethics, which is not to be misleading. There's also many voices of counselling in Australia, PACFA being one of them. So this could be a simple fix for the code of ethics here, just changing the word they to a. ACA will promote and encourage commitment to equality of opportunity by its members. Now, this is really interesting. Now, I'm not across this. I will do another video on it. It's only, what do I want to say? It's information that's been passed to me in conversations with other professionals. And I do need to look into it more closely, but it's my understanding that at the moment, perhaps, and again, I need to research it myself, but perhaps it's related to national standards and things like that. But it's my understanding that the ACA is advocating for its top tier members to be on Medicare and not the other members. So I would be interested to know how the equal opportunities fits with that for all members. Application of the code. It's applicable to all members of the ACA, regardless of level, modality, environment, employment, and type of counselling. Okay. And the code is also deemed to include those members of the association engaged in providing associated services. Okay. Fair enough. And then it finishes. So it really looks like, sorry, I just whacked my microphone with my elbow there. It really looks like this is preparing ACA members to move into a more scientific model. I would keep your eyes on subsequent versions. It looks like we've got, some things that are perhaps falling under, I don't know, I would question whether or not the online counselling and psychotherapy, for example, falls under social media. I don't feel like it does. As a supervisor myself, I would probably put that into like service delivery. I think it's confusing that we're talking about counsellors for some of it and registered counsellors for others without having a clear definition in the guide. But it looks like really the main difference was about speaking out about employees on the board. That looks like the main difference to me. But again, this is just my first pass. It's something that I would probably want to sit with, reflect with, do a compare and contrast again, and see if there's anything else. But at the moment, just on a first pass, reading it with you now, this looks like the big thing that's jumping out, saying that, and I'm referring to section 6.5. A member will not make any derogatory or insulting remark against the association itself or against another member, nor will they criticise or make any allegations against an employee or other member without first notifying the secretary. But we don't know who the secretary is. I just went and had a look, for those listening on the podcast, I just went and had a look on the ACA website, and there isn't any mention of who the secretary is. We can see a whole lot of employees there, but we cannot see who the current secretary is. So who do you even address it to? So that seems to be like the main change. But it was interesting to go over this with you. I think a lot of the time, I don't know, some people might not look at the code of ethics and practice. We should be doing that. I think sometimes we don't, because we're thinking to ourselves, oh, it's going to be dry and boring. And it is dry and boring. But it's also important to recognize that the code of ethics and practice is there to support you. It's there to provide you with clear guidance on what to do and what not to do with your clients, with each other, in public, all those kinds of things. So it's there to help you, okay? And I would, if I were in the ACA, I would download this current code of ethics. I would keep it somewhere, maybe take it to your next supervision session, and discuss any areas that you're wanting some clarification on with your supervisor. Also, in this video and podcast recording today, we're able to identify some things that were omitted from the current version of the Code of Ethics and Practice. That's version 16, including obviously some definitions have been omitted, and there are things there that we're needing some further clarification on. So if you are a member and you want those definitions and you want those clarifications, it's okay for you to email and just say, thank you very much for the latest update of the Code of Ethics. I was just curious about this. Can you please give me some clarification, or can you please give me some guidance? And hopefully then you will see those updates in version 17, whenever that comes out, okay? So the big difference over 5 years, not too much. The last version in 2000, the last version was version 15, and that was done in 2018 or 2019. And now we've got this version, and it looks like, for the most part, the biggest change is what I highlighted for you a moment ago, which was around, I'm just scrolling, I've gone straight past it, which was around, as I was mentioning, going to the secretary first. It might also be interesting to send the ACA an email and ask who is the secretary, and can their contact details be included in an upcoming version or revision of the Code of Ethics, so you know who you've got to send it to. Yep. Okay, so I hope that this was helpful. It's really good to be able to go over this. If you have questions about it, take it to your supervisor. And if you have any comments or questions or concerns, and you're in the ACA, remember, if you are going to comment on this video in any way, shape or form, to do it with respect, okay? As I said, all opinions, all thoughts, all considerations are absolutely welcome at all times, as long as they're expressed in a way that's professional and respectful, okay? Thank you so much for taking time out of your day to listen to this and bring yourself up to date with everything that's going on. I know it's been a little bit of a marathon, nearly 2 hours, so well done if you stuck with me for this. But yeah, hopefully it's interesting and it's going to be helpful for you to unpack it with someone. Okay. Any questions about it, go to the ACA with your questions and your supervisor. Okay. Have a lovely day, everybody.